Let me look this way because I'm looking at the computer. So hello and welcome everyone to our virtual author event with Rosie Walsh. We're really excited. Thank you everyone for joining us. Just a few housekeeping rules, please. If you can, keep your cameras off and your microphones muted so that we don't have any interference with our interview. We encourage everyone to write their questions for the author in the chat box, and we'll go over that at the end of our interview. So my name is Debbie Keener, and I am the head of Community Services and Adult Library Programming at the Oceanside Library. I encourage you all to visit our website and check out our programs because we have a lot of great programs coming up for you this winter into spring. I would like to introduce my colleague and fellow presenter for this afternoon, Head of Adult Services, Nadine Busili. Together here, we're known as Deb and Nay. We have our online book discussion on the same page as Deb and Nay. We do the author spotlight together, and we do a podcast, Books and Banter with Deb and Nay. And we sit next to each other all day. All day, Rosie, all day.
You two are A, prolific, and B, clearly very good friends. Or worst enemies.
No, good friends. Okay. So take it away, Nadine.
Thank you, Deb. I'm so excited to have you, Rosie, with us today. A little bit about Rosie, her bio. Rosie has lived and traveled all over the world, working as a documentary producer and writer. Ghosted, her first novel, which we have here in the library, was her first American debut. Was a New York Times bestseller and has sold more than 1 million copies worldwide. And The Love of My Life is her second novel. She's joining us live from Devon, UK, where she lives with her partner and her 2 children who just went to sleep.
Well, they're out there. They're on the landing. They're lurking.
They're lurking. Well, welcome. Thanks for joining us. For those of you who don't know, this was our The Love of My Life was our Deb and Nay book selection for January. So we all read this during our holiday time. It was a great novel to kind of cuddle up with, a little twisty and dark and really interesting. So before we get into the details of the novel and you as an author, Rosie, can you just tell everyone a little bit about yourself? I wondered if you wanted to grow up, be a marine biologist or an obituary writer. And how and when did you come into writing? So tell us a little bit about you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me, and hello everyone. It's nice to be here, and thank you for choosing my humble little book for your January pick. That's really lovely. I did not want or plan to be a writer. It kind of happened to me, and as a child I did spend a lot of time reading. I did write stories. They were pretty poor. I came to be a writer because I was writing a blog for Marie Claire, the magazine, well, for their website, about my really awful love life. And an editor approached me and said, "Oh, I think you're a fab writer. You should really consider writing a novel. Do you want to meet up and talk about it?" So we met up to talk about it, and I proceeded to tell her that I was not a storyteller, and that whilst I accepted that I was decent at writing, I needed a brief to write to. You know, if I was to ever write anything, it would be non-fiction, or maybe, you know, one day I might become an editor. At the time I was working in television, I worked in arts or sometimes science in the BBC, at the BBC, and I knew I didn't want to work in telly anymore. I wasn't happy there at all. But even when this woman said to me in person, "I really think you should consider being a writer," my response was, no, not sure it's my thing. So anyway, I got back that night, and I told my housemate about the discussion, and he was just like, What are you talking about? You mean you met with an editor at a massive publishing house and you told him you didn't want to write novels?" And when I looked at it that way, I thought, I may potentially have made an error. So I emailed her and I said, well, I'll have a go. And she said, great. And I said, could you just tell me how to write, like how I go about writing a book so I can get started? And she was like, just write about 100,000 words and send them to me.
Oh.
And that was it. And so to this day, actually, when people ask me for my sort of top tips as a writer, I'm pretty brutal because it's the only advice that was given me. And it's the only advice that I think actually is necessary. You can't write a novel until you've written a novel. There is no practicing, there's no number of blogs or short stories or non-fiction or anything else you can write that can help you learn to write a novel other than writing a really, really bad novel. So that's how I started. I wrote a really bad novel. The editor who'd approached me hated it. She had no interest in acquiring it. Luckily, other people saw its value and took it on.
Was that ghosted?
No. So this was 13 years ago. Prior to writing Ghosted, I wrote 4 novels under a pseudonym.
Oh.
Yeah, so that was my first novel under the pseudonym, which is Lucy Robinson. I wrote, I guess, romantic comedies. I mean, they were a bit more highbrow than that, but yeah, romantic comedies, I guess.
Oh, okay. That's fun. Yeah. Is there a reason why you use the pseudonym and now you use Rosie Walsh just out of
Yeah, so the pseudonym came about as a necessity, really, because I was writing this blog for Marie Claire about my awful love life. Okay. And of course, I couldn't use my real name for that blog. Wouldn't really be entirely fair on the men that I was going on dates with.
Right.
So because I had a following as and to be honest, when I started out writing Ghosted, I had no plans to do anything different, but I was I think crucially for me as a creative, I was out of contract. I'd just gone out of contract with my publishers, and there's a real freedom in that I'd heard people talk about, but I thought, God, it would be terrifying to not have a contract, to just be writing into the darkness, hoping that my time would one day be recompensed. But actually it was really freeing, and it gave me time to just write the kind of book that I think I was always meant to write, which is, what Ghosted and The Love of My Life are, which is this sort of, I guess, a hybrid between, a mystery, a domestic suspense, and a love story. And it just came out naturally. And when I was about halfway through, my agent said, right, enough, this is not a Lucy Robinson novel. It's time that we brought you out under your own name. What say you? And she posed it as a question, but it's never a question with my agent. If she decrees it, it shall be so.
Oh. That's really interesting. I always did wonder about that. Some authors do choose to do a pseudonym or a pen name, and what's the motivation behind that? So that does that makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad that you found your voice and your name in these wonderful novels. You mentioned the book is really hard to describe. Right. Can you, for those of us here, can you just give us a summary? I can't do it justice. So about The Love of My Life.
Yeah, of course. So the Love of My Life is the story of Leo and Emma, who seem like a perfect couple. They're happily married. They have a lovely daughter, Ruby. They've got a very funny rescue dog called John Keats. They live in a beautiful, tiny, falling apart house in a really beautiful old historic part of London. He's a successful obituary writer. She's a marine biologist. It all looks good, but when we meet them, Emma's waiting to find out if her chemotherapy has worked, because she has leukemia, and Leo is dealing with his grief and fear in the way that he knows best, which is to start writing. So he's writing her obituary just in case, and in the process of doing so stumbles across some information which sets him off on a really dark journey of discovery, which culminates in him discovering that his wife, Emma, the love of his life, isn't even called Emma, and that almost every single thing she's told him about herself is a lie. That's the elevator pitch, although I sort of feel an elevator pitch should be one sentence, but I did have that down for a while, but it didn't really do it justice.
It doesn't. And I before we chose this book, I was, I had been reading it myself. It was recommended from a friend. And I was trying to describe it to some of our library patrons that come in, and I'm like, there's this big secret. The wife has a secret. Who doesn't love a secret, you know? And it unravels so well. You know, as the reader, I was sucked in from the beginning of wanting to know, where is this going? What is this secret? Who is this woman? I mean, it really was very gripping from the beginning.
That's really good to hear.
Mm-hmm.
It's really good to hear, because it's tricky. You know, I didn't just want it to be another book about family secrets and, you know, someone's hiding a secret from someone else. I mean, it was very important that we conveyed somehow that this was a book about a man finding out that his wife quite literally doesn't exist.
So on that, like, what was your inspiration? Because the book really, it's a romance and it's an emotional thriller. So what was your inspiration to write this book? Like, what made you think of this specific,
the spark
like
for
the,
this
yeah, right,
story?
the story.
So it started off in a restaurant in the city of Bristol, which is where I lived for a few years in the UK. It's a couple of hours from where I am now. And my partner and I had just moved there, and we were, you know, trying to make friends, and we booked dinner at this Italian restaurant, you know, sort of friend date with a couple that we vaguely had met. And, you know, I have to be honest, the conversation was diabolical. Like, there was no chemistry. There was no connection. It was not a fun evening. It was a very uncomfortable evening, until the guy in the couple started telling us about an obituary he was writing, which was for a poet. He was a poet himself, and he was writing an obituary about a really famous poet under whom I believe he'd studied as an undergraduate briefly. And I was just fascinated by, I mean, actually the fairly basic fact, which probably most people know, which is that, you know, most generally obituaries are written in advance. You know, for anyone famous or anyone who's likely to have an obituary written, it's written in advance for obvious reasons, because you know, all papers want to break their story or their article first, so you need to be prepared.
Right. I never thought of that, honestly. I really didn't. I did not give obituary until that was mentioned in your book. Like, I didn't. I mean, it makes sense, but did you?
Doesn't it?
We talked about it.
Yeah.
Talked about it. I figured like very famous celebrities, yes, but I didn't know
that hadn't occurred to me.
Oh, really?
No. Had no idea.
Okay.
Anyway, so I started asking more questions about the obituary, and, you know, like, God, does this guy know that you're writing his obituary? Like, when you call him and you interview him, like, are you calling,
okay
are you
with that?
talking to him? Is he sort of curating himself every time he talks to you in the hope that you'll write, you know, a really glowing obit for him? Anyway, he didn't have many answers to that because he hadn't written an obit before, but it just started me thinking, and I just thought immediately, this is just brilliantly fertile ground for writers. So I got my phone out under the table and I just wrote a novel. I just wrote something like obituary writer starts writing somebody up, discovers they're not who they say they are, or something like that. And that didn't really take form. And then when I started developing it into a novel, I came up with all sorts of dreadful ideas. My agent rejected all of them, and eventually called me and said, like, what are you doing? Like, you keep sending me ideas for literary farces and sort of weird genres that, you know, are not you at all. Like, I think it's maybe time to let go of this idea. And then shortly after that very annoying phone call, I should say I do absolutely love my agent and hugely admire her. She's annoying because she's always right. But anyway, I then just suddenly thought, hang on, rather than obituary writer starts writing somebody's obituary, discovers they're not who they say they are, how about obituary writer starts up writing his wife's obituary and discovers she's not who she says she is? And I sent that over to my agent, and she replied immediately saying, now you're talking. And so off I went. But I mean, it has taken years. I was researching this on and off whilst I was writing Ghosted. I've had to do so much research on the world of obituaries, and so much research into marine biology and many other things besides, you know, fields of medicine, psychiatry, and a whole bunch of other stuff which I won't go into because I don't want to spoil it, the plot. But yeah, it's the sum total of years of thinking and research and doomed ideas and drafts and so on. This was not a fully formed idea by any means. It was a labor of pain for sure, not love.
Where do you go first for your research? Like, how do you start out? We've talked to a lot of authors that research is such a big part of their work, whether it's historical fiction or even just like you said, a fictional. We actually recently had Shelby Van Pelt on talking with us, and here it is of the octopus. I don't know if you've read her book, Remarkably Bright Creatures, about an octopus, but the amount of research she had to do into that was. So I'm just fascinated. So what's your first step? Like, aside from the friend who wrote obits, what did like, where do you go first?
Well, he wasn't an obit writer, and I never talked to him again because it was such an awkward.
Okay.
You didn't choose him for research, no?
No. So the world of obits was quite easy. You can start off online fairly easily.
Okay.
I soon discovered books, but I soon discovered all kinds of crazy sort of micro sites and strange sort of locked online communities where all these obit nerds from around the world gather and share sort of premium obit content and tip each other off about deaths. There's a line at the very beginning of the book where Leo talks about how Emma wakes up every morning and checks a site called Wiki Deaths, which is a website. So I found I just found this amazing obit subculture online. But of course, I had to read a lot of obituaries as well. So I had subscriptions to several broadsheet newspapers here in the UK. But then I started contacting obit writers because I don't believe you can research anything just by reading. It's a good start, but I mean it can't be any more than a start. So that's when I started calling people. I did it the way that I always do. I find people on Twitter. I'll put a thing on my personal Facebook page, not my professional one, but just because I travel a lot, I've got several hundred friends on there because it's people I've met all over the world. There'll always be somebody. If I say, guys, I need a brain surgeon, anyone got one? Someone's always got a brain surgeon for me to talk to.
Right.
So yeah, I then spent a day on the obits desk at the Telegraph in London, and the Telegraph is in obit circles considered, like the gold standard globally, in sort of wry, witty, very spare obit writing. And I loved my day with them, and they kept apologizing, saying, "Oh God, there's nothing going on. So sorry, this is so boring." And I was just like, "You have no idea how wonderful it is hearing you talk about these batty people, like these absolute lunatics that you could only find in Britain." So yeah, I did all sorts of things. I went to death conferences, I went to death cafes, because there were originally going to be many more deaths than there actually are now. I spoke to death doulas. It was exhaustive.
What is a death cafe?
And a death dealer? Like, what is
death doula? So do you know what a
doula?
Yeah,
I thought you said dealer. I was like, I don't know.
No, that would be more niche. A death doula, yeah. A death doula helps somebody die. They're a companion for, a sort of
like a
compassionate, but but removed companion for somebody who's dying. And that, they help people, particularly when their families are falling apart and they need somebody who can really feel and hold their pain, but who isn't going to go down with their own grief. It made me think, actually, what, if I died early, then I would probably want somebody like that in my corner, with whom to talk about the stuff that I just wouldn't be able to say to my family. Death cafes are informal gatherings of people who get together to talk about death, and it's not a grief or bereavement support group, and they make very clear at the beginning of any death cafe that's not what it's for. It's quite literally a discussion about death. And because there's a growing body of people who are concerned about the fact that we don't talk about death, in the Western world. We avoid it, we skirt around it. I don't know if any of you on the line today or in the library have had detailed conversations with your family about what you would want done with your body if you died, what kind of funeral you'd like, how you want your body to be disposed of, and all of that kind of stuff. We avoid it because it's not a pleasant subject.
Right.
but there's also a whole death dinner party movement as well, which you can find online, and it's basically encouraging people to throw dinner parties with their friends, you know, nothing special, nothing fancy, but just get a good bunch of friends round, and the subject for the evening is death, and like how we would all like to die, and how we feel about dying, and that sort of thing. It's again, there's a massive death subculture out there, people who are really invested in talking about and engaging with death.
Wow.
I guess it is a mystery. So, you know, it keeps us all guessing, and everyone wants to, we all go through it.
Right.
So
Well, that's true.
you
So
want to
it's
kind of
talk about it,
normalize it a little
It
bit.
makes people feel better to talk about it
Yeah.
too, maybe.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting that you had to go dive deep into all of that. Now the title, oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, was it harder to do the research on that than the marine biology?
No, the marine biology stuff was absolutely fascinating, but a nightmare to research, because it's just, I mean, you probably heard this already in your interview recently, like I kept saying to the scientists who I was talking to and following around and interviewing and, you know, poking my nose around their laboratories, like, would you mind just rephrasing that, you know, in layman's terms? And then discovered that they couldn't, because there are no layman's terms in science, because it's science. And they've spent many, many, many years training and learning, and, you know, perfecting that not their craft, but, you know, their knowledge in the way that I perfect my craft. So ultimately, I was party to hundreds probably of discussions that I couldn't really follow, and I was just taking notes. And sometimes when I just need something to just sprinkle in, a little detail to put into the manuscript, I would just pick up one of the academic marine biology journals that I've been given by various people during the course of my research, and I just have to extrapolate something. And I was about to say, to this day, I have no idea if I extrapolated these things incorrectly, but actually a wonderful, wonderful marine biologist, Professor John Spicer, he agreed to read my entire manuscript. He read the whole book for me.
Really?
To fact check it. I know, what a nice guy. I tried to pay him, he wouldn't take any money. I know. So yeah, I mean, that was, I loved it. I was fascinated by it, but I also found it very difficult because I just couldn't understand a word anyone was saying.
Yeah, I'm sure. It's you know, the title reveals so very little. This book was so surprising. The title reveals very little about what to expect when you open the book. Was this on purpose? And did you have any say in the title? How did the title come to be?
So the title, it's the first title I've come up with, actually. I'm notoriously awful at naming my books, which is fine because I'm always surrounded by brilliant people who are really good at that sort of thing. But yeah, I did not know how to name this book. I was at a total loss. And so my previous books, I was at a total, when I started this, I was at a total loss. And then I just suddenly thought, oh, the love of my life. And I had it. And it was so easy because all of my editors around the world just wanted to call their book that. I think there's maybe I can't remember how many territories I have. It's something like 20, I think, with this one. I think there's maybe 2 or 3 who've called it something else, but generally everyone just wants to call it that. But actually, if you've read the story, it's cleverer than, you know, it might seem ostensibly when you first pick up the book, because it refers to a whole bunch of things and people.
Yes, we had a really good discussion about the title, which is why the question was there. We all
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I wish it's so cool, the idea of people getting together in a book group to discuss my book. I was invited to one years and years ago at a library in London, actually, and I had an email from my publicist that afternoon saying, oh, you know, I've been warned that, you know, they don't hold back on their criticism of a novel. And I felt a bit sick, and then I thought about it and I was like, I'm not turning up for this. Like, I really don't mind if people don't like my book, but I'm not going to sit there for an hour and have people tell me that. Like, my skin's not thick enough. I'm a human being. So I actually did go. I got my publicist to email and say, oh, I think Rosie's not keen. And they said, oh, no, don't worry. We actually, everyone loved your book. But, you know, it makes my blood run cold, the thought of the treatment that other authors may have had from that group.
Well, I do think that, we meet with the author afterwards because
Sensible.
yeah, but also we found sometimes that once we talk about it and then we meet the author and talk, right, as a group, like we have a whole new appreciation for the book
Right.
and where it came, how it came about. And, so it actually is nice to separate the author from the book a little bit. It almost gives the story a second go around because you're like,
Right.
oh,
Because you're
I
looking
didn't
at
even
it,
think of it that way.
right,
or-
a different perspective.
We
Yeah.
found that a lot.
Mhm.
So it's nice, although would have loved to have you, and we all really did enjoy the book. I find we get more out of it as readers,
Yeah.
hearing from you separately, so.
No, well, it
you
makes a lot of sense. And I think most authors would be too scared to do it any other way.
We actually had one author, Stephanie DeCarolis.
Yeah, she came on
but
for just
then,
a little bit.
yeah, and then she went off.
Yeah,
But
she also wanted us to be able to speak freely,
Freely.
and I think people wouldn't really bash it. We, wouldn't bash a book if the author was there. The discussion would be a little different.
Right. We hope.
We hope.
Phew.
But then again, maybe some of our folks don't hold back either, so. Judy.
Well, I don't go onto Amazon at all. I don't read my reviews on
I was
any
gonna ask,
website.
yeah, that's one of the questions because you said thick skin, and I don't know how authors go on to Goodreads and Amazon and read all those individual, I'm sure you read some reviews or, but professional reviews and things like that, but I'm sure you feel.
I think if people were capable of keeping their emotional lives out of reviews, it would be fine. I'm perfectly able to react and respond to carefully considered criticism because I get it from all my editors. It's fine. But the problem is people throw vitriol into negative feedback. It's just a weird thing that human beings do. I mean, people who just sit there all day writing 1-star reviews on Amazon. And they go, they're obviously getting some sort of energy from making it personal and just getting really bitter about it. And it's a shame
Right.
because that book group that I was talking about that I went to, actually, as I said, like the feedback was positive, but there was just one thing that one woman said that was negative, but she expressed it really carefully and respectfully, but honestly.
Right.
And it was absolutely brilliant. And I've carried that thought that she planted into every novel that I've written since.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, I think most authors have no problem with criticism. It's a way that people express it. And I think
Yes.
this is what we unfortunately do as human beings. We take a pop at someone else to make ourselves feel better about ourselves. And
Well, they call it the keyboard courage. All of a sudden,
yeah.
behind or you're saying negative things about the book or the author, and you have to remember there's a person writing the book, so you don't need to get personal and trash their work. I mean, it's somebody's passion, and people just need to be more respectful nowadays. And unfortunately,
Just constructive.
Exactly.
And also bear in mind, most authors are mad. I mean, I don't mean mad in the American sense, just we're crazy.
Right.
we don't need to feel any worse about ourselves. We're already in years of therapy.
That's so funny.
So again, the book had many twists and turns and many revelations. Were there things that you changed along the way? Did you see it going one way and then it was changed? And were you happy with the changes?
Yeah, it was a very painful novel to write, the most painful writing experience I've had. And that had a lot to do with the context in which I wrote it. I had 2 babies in that time. We had a huge project, an enormous project happened on our house. Ghosted became unexpectedly became an international bestseller. So I was flying all over the place.
Oh my goodness.
And doing loads of publicity online as well. It just constantly was interrupting my time writing the love of my life. I also got meningitis twice, and then COVID happened. It was the perfect storm. So, contextually, there was a lot going on. But even in spite of that, this was an absolute beast to write. And it changed many times. I think my problem with this one was that, I generally like to have the story kind of laid out in advance. It's really not fun writing into the darkness, into a void. But I got to a certain point in my plotting where I just realized there was just a big problem I couldn't solve. I could not get around it. And so I then stalled for months just trying in advance to solve this problem, which I just couldn't. And I was just sitting at my desk day after day, like typing away, writing away, just calling people, talking it through, just could not figure out a way through it. And so eventually I just thought, I'm going to have to just start writing this thing, because I can't afford financially to stall any further. So I wrote all the way up to that point, which was quite a painful process anyway, because I'd spent many months kind of thinking, I don't think I can make this story work. So I was coming into it with a negative energy, which is never helpful. And then I eventually got to the point that I was worried about, and what do you know, couldn't write it. It just wasn't happening. So I then got stuck again for months. So yes, it has changed hugely. I mean, the original setup was, well, there were going to be some pretty major deaths in the main characters, for starters.
Okay.
I think at one point all four of them. I mean, not together,
Yes,
but I killed all of them off at some point. But actually, the unexpected feedback from my American editor was, Rosie, this is too dark for your readership and for the way that we feel it's best to publish you. Like, this is just too depressing. And so actually I had to strip out a lot of darkness, which is potentially surprising to anyone who's read it, because there is quite a lot of darkness given the kind of novel that it is. But yeah, that was a major change. Actually, she said this whole thing is just too awful, it's just too sad, and just it's soul destroying. And it was soul destroying hearing that feedback, because I knew that it was going to be such an enormous job, and nobody wants that. She expressed it beautifully, but nobody wants that kind of feedback, because at the time of getting it, obviously you've handed in the best book that you can, you don't know any other way to write it, and you're being told you need to fundamentally alter the DNA of this book. And it's so overwhelming. But do you know what, with her words came a certain sense of relief, because deep down I knew. And part of the reason I'd struggled so much with this book was that I was feeling that too. I just didn't have her dispassionate, her distance from the book that enabled her to see, this is too much.
Wow.
So thank God for feedback.
Yes.
Right.
Wow. One of the things we discussed last week about the book was the way the novel was written, and you see it through the lens of Leo and Emma, a little more Leo at first, and then Emma, and how did you decide the characters, which characters would be kind of the storytellers in this? And then that itself, I think, is incredibly challenging. So how did you overcome that? You have these 2 points of views in this one secret. So how did that work for you?
Again, tricky, and there was a lot of trial and error, and there was a process of layering. I was always going to, when I first came up with the idea, Leo was going to narrate the entire book, but my agent quite reasonably said, Rosie, that's not going to work for a largely female readership. Think again. So I did, and she was right, and actually it made sense very early on to have Leo and Emma narrating, but it made it a lot more difficult, because if Emma's narrating and we don't want to find out her secret straight away, what's she going to say?
Yes.
I didn't want half the book to be Leo saying, I'm trying to find who my wife is and what's happened, and her going, oh, I think Leo's nearly found out who I am.
Right.
I mean, obviously there was a bit of that, but I sort of needed her to have some narrative of her own. It was quite funny writing them, because Emma came to me fully formed, whereas Leo, I didn't know him at all when I started writing.
Wow.
And basically for quite a long while they were the same person, so it didn't actually matter that I was dual narration. I hadn't developed Leo's character sufficiently to differentiate him from Emma, and it was my writing partner who said one day, Leo and Emma are basically the same person, Rosie. Like, I think it's time you did a bit of character development. And then, of course, we have a third person who narrates a little bit through diary entries, and I won't talk about that person.
Yes.
But almost every person who was involved with the editing of this book said, I think that third person needs to go, doesn't work, doesn't make sense. And I stuck to my guns because I knew that we needed their voice. It was essential, and I'm glad I did, because ultimately I think it was the right decision. I mean, maybe some of your readers disagree, but I think for me as a storyteller, it made sense. So that went back and forth a lot as well. There was a lot of trial and error there with that third voice.
What did you edit out of this? You mentioned some major character deaths. Was there anything else that you had a hard time parting with? Because it sounds like that kind of resolved itself for you. You knew you had to move in a different direction. Was there anything that you had to edit out that you really did?
There was, but I can't really talk about it. It would spoil. It would spoil it.
Okay.
So I'm going to have to pass on that one.
Okay. Well, in terms of who was your favorite character to write, or just who was your favorite character? Leo, Emma, Ruby,
Sheila.
Yeah.
Sheila.
She was your favorite?
Oh, who doesn't love Sheila? She's magnificent.
Yeah.
I really miss her, actually. I also enjoyed John Keats. And actually,
knew what was going on.
Yeah. I met up for a weekend writing retreat with my favorite writer friends a couple of weekends ago, and we were talking about the book is being developed for a major miniseries.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. How cool is that?
That's
And we were talking about at some point soonish, I will have a meeting, I believe, with them to talk about, how they plan to develop it and what their sort of creative vision is for it. And we agreed that I should march into this meeting and say, listen, the battle, the bridge that I will die on, the hill that I will die on if I need to, is John Keats, the jungle music loving rescue dog.
Right. Yes, of course.
So I love John too.
Yeah.
So we asked you about, do you read book reviews? So
And what do you want your readers to take away from this novel with? There's trust is a theme. There's so many themes. Oh my gosh. Relationships, trust in a relationship. Everything. What would you love, loss? I mean, there's endless. What would you like to see your readers take away from this?
You know what? There's no point answering these things dishonestly. The truth is, I've never really given that much thought. The truth is, what I think about when I'm writing is the reader's experience whilst they are in the book. And True. I think, I've seen a lot of author talks where they're talking about the themes of their book, and I'm watching them and I'm like, are you making this up? Did you really think about this theme that you want to convey, that you feel is important, that you want this work to reflect? Or have you just written the best book you can, and now you're looking at it retrospectively, you can see that this theme comes out? Mm-hmm. If I'm totally honest, the themes that I sometimes will talk about in an interview are themes that I did not plan. They're themes that came out organically upon writing and rewriting of the book. And, and I also think people are going to take entirely different things away from it. Like if when I've done live events and I polled readers about like who they would want to play Leo and Emma in a movie, I get hundreds of different responses, because hundreds of different people will read hundreds of different Leo and Emmas. It's
true.
I think my job as an author is quite finite. So much of it is subject to interpretation, isn't it?
Yeah, and we found, just talking about it, that there were so many layers to this novel that were, some of our readers were more influenced by the mental illness issue that comes up. Others with, the trust in the relationship. Like there's so many things that are balanced so well that it was up to us. I came out. It
resonates with people differently.
Yeah, I saw things differently about the book after we read it. Yes. I think we kind of all said, I didn't even think of it from that way. And, so that was really interesting. And I get what you're saying about the themes, because everyone sort of had a little bit of a different take on some of these things. Saw more importance in some things than others,
Right.
or it explained why some of the characters behaved the way they did, but others didn't see
See it
that.
that
Like, it was
way.
really interesting. We had really a great conversation
did,
last
we
week
did.
about it.
But I'm just curious, just in your view, who would you want to play Emma and Leo?
Yes.
Well, I can tell you now that Emma's going to be played by Amy Adams, which is an absolute dream come true.
Okay.
I know, isn't that insane? I can't
Yes.
quite believe it.
So amazing.
Wow.
I know.
First time someone's answered that question. too.
Others never answer.
Never answers. That's awesome. Okay, so what about Leo? Do we know?
I mean, the problem is I'm a working mum of two really young kids. I haven't seen a film in years.
Right.
The last film I remember seeing was A Star Is Born. So whenever people ask me that, I just say, oh, Bradley Cooper.
Yeah.
Well, that's that.
He's gorgeous and vaguely Leo-like in my head, and I think he's a fantastic actor. I'll take him.
That would
Okay.
work.
I don't know if him and Amy know each other or anything, but if I'll throw it into the ring.
I could
I
see
can
that.
see that. Yeah.
He actually would be a good for
Yeah.
Leo.
Yeah.
But it depends also if they're going to do it set it in the UK or in America. You know, will Emma and Leo be American or British? And I mean, I don't mind. She's Amy Adams. She can do whatever she likes with my book. Quite frankly. But,
I love that. That's great.
I think that I would be a little bit sad to see it become American, but I say that actually what I really would like would be to just see it on the screen. I mean, that in itself is going to be the most incredible treat. So I'll take it however they want to do it. I'm really not bothered at all.
Yeah, that's great.
That's great.
Oh my goodness.
So what are you working on right now?
So I am working on I can't say much about it, but it's part of it set in Thailand. I have not got a title, but it's about a very young couple who impulsively get married on a beach, and 5 hours after they've got married, the young man, the groom, is taken away by armed men, and she never sees him again.
Oh, okay.
Until
Until dun, dun.
I like it.
I like it too. That's good.
What do you anticipate a release date for that, or are you still in the early stages?
I've written 7,000 words, so I wouldn't get excited.
Okay.
Okay. Is there research on that?
Yeah. Did you have to go to Thailand?
I did. I went in October for 7 glorious days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
As any mother of young children will know, the freedom of waking up and thinking only about what I needed to do and taking care of my needs was, I want to cry whenever I think about it. Just because obviously when you're a mum, particularly when your kids are young, it's so impossible to remember what your old life even looked like having any freedom or dignity or space or time or anything.
It's very true.
Tell us how you really feel, Rosie.
Well, I mean, it's true. I mean, I don't need to say how much I love them, and it's worthwhile. I don't need to say that, but like, it was extraordinary being taken out of my life for a week and seeing just how much I've lost. And and again, I say that with a full heart of love for my children.
Right.
And I wouldn't turn the clock back, but you have to be, I think, transplanted to another country to really get a vague taste of what your life used to be like.
Yes.
Wow.
That was my experience anyway. Maybe I'm a terrible mum.
No, not at all. And it does get easier. I know everyone says that, but it does. The time happens, but it happens slowly, right? And eventually you're like, oh, wow, I can actually go out to dinner and not cut chicken or something. And you start to realize it's happening so slow. And then, but when you're in it, man,
What do they say? The days go slow, the years go fast. Is that the saying?
yes.
So,
And
yes.
it brings us to our question, because I was going to ask you this too. Jerry just asked, do you tend to write before your kids get up, after they go to bed, or whenever you can during the day? And I can't imagine trying to write a novel, the distraction, right, of having to be interrupted for your life every so often. How do you manage that? So Tell us a little bit.
I do get up before my kids get up. That's my sort of it's my quiet time. That's my mental health time. That's when I try and set myself up mentally for the day. I might meditate a bit or do some reading or just try and sit quietly. I don't get long because I get up so early. It would be a really good time of day to write, but I've tried not having my quiet time in the morning, and I'm just a lunatic if I don't. So at the moment, I have childcare on a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And in those days, once I've factored in the school run for the older child and, a bit of basic life admin and, making and having lunch and stuff, I reckon I get about 12 hours a week to write. It's not enough.
No.
It's really not enough. But do you know what? It's what I've got right now. And my one regret about my time as a parent is that I got childcare far too early for me, for my son, my first son. I got a nanny when he was 5 months, and I know you guys in the States do it totally differently and you go back to work much earlier. And for me, it just wasn't right. I needed a year off. And I bitterly regret losing that time with him, bitterly. So I'm not willing to have any more childcare than I have, and I can't work any harder than I do without, dying of exhaustion. So it is what it is, and it won't always be like this. And yes, it would be nice to get some money in the bank soon, because we live in a medieval farm and there's water just pouring through the roof every time it rains. But it will be ready when it's ready, and I'm just trying to trust every day that I'm doing the right thing by trying to balance motherhood and work in the way that I am.
Yeah. So
can we just ask, how old are your kids? Are they
2 and 5?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I'm in the trenches.
You
Yes,
are.
you are.
But look at what's happened, and this novel's blown up. Everyone's talking about it, and now you're saying it's even going to the screen. So whatever you're doing is working for you.
It's working.
You know what? Thank you. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing it so well, and are you adjusting to the popularity that has come about because of this novel? Social media, I'm sure your followers are up and like all of that stuff. Are you?
I find it really weird.
It is, right?
I find it throughout the whole thing. I've just been an exhausted mum, and all of this stuff, all this crazy stuff. Both of my books have hit the New York Times bestsellers list, and in Germany it was #1 for weeks on their bestseller. Like, crazy things have happened. This film deal, like so many mad things have happened. But every time I get an email or a phone call telling me about it, I almost feel like I'm acting when I react, with tears or screaming or whatever, because deep down I don't believe any of it. Deep down I can't engage, because as a writer, your success happens remotely. It's not, there's nothing happening in the room with you. You're not standing in front of a stadium full of cheering people. You're sitting in a silent room trying to eke out, trying to write a novel in 5 minutes before you have to go and change a potty or a nappy or something. So generally I don't feel it. I just don't feel it in my gut, even though, it has changed my financial circumstances and, where we live, and to a certain extent the way we live our lives, not loads. But in spite of those things, deep down, if I'm honest, I don't feel it. It's hard to really take on or believe, because it's so remote and so disconnected from my daily life.
Well, that's nice that you're very humbled, and that kids should be your distraction in your life. That's really what's important. Although we certainly love this book, and we were really glad that,
Well, can we tell you, even though as you're saying, you feel it remotely, can we just feel this, because it was great.
Oh, thank you.
Fill your silent room.
That's really lovely. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. Because I feel what you're saying. Like, you don't get to, it's not like you're walking out on a stage, but you're right. So, bravo to you, as Jerry said a few sentences ago. Bravo.
Thank you.
So
Thank you very much.
So I think we have some time for our lightning round.
Okay, let's do it.
I'm going to set the timer for a minute. We have a bunch of questions. If you can answer as many as possible in 1 minute.
Oh my gosh.
the clock. Nadine will do the clock. I'll do the questions.
Yes, stopwatch. Okay, on your mark, get set, go.
Which character from your novel would you like to have a drink or coffee with?
Emma. Sheila.
Oh, both. What was your favorite pandemic cocktail or snack?
Oh God, what was it called? It was a combination of gin, lime juice, and sugar syrup.
Oh, like a mule, almost like a
Moscow mule,
kind
something
of
like
That
thing.
sort of thing, yeah.
Okay. What shows have you been binging?
Absolutely none. I'm too busy writing.
Okay, okay. Well, if you were binging a show, or how about when you're reading, do you do it? Well, that doesn't make sense. I was gonna say in the theater or a couch, it doesn't make sense. If you were to binge a show, would you rather do it in a theater or on the couch?
Oh, on the couch where I've got
On the
blankets and snacks.
Exactly. I messed up that question. Give her 10 more seconds.
Okay, 10 more.
What book were you forced to read and enjoyed?
Oh my gosh, what a brilliant question. To Kill a Mockingbird. Had no interest in it, and it went on to be one of the greatest books I've ever read.
Right.
All right, that was it, but we're gonna ask the last question.
Last question. Can you
Okay.
recommend a book from an author that wouldn't be on our radar?
Oh gosh. Well, I haven't actually read anything in months apart from one book I read the other day, but she'll absolutely be on your radar. So I haven't got a good answer for that.
Okay. What was the book?
Oh my God. It's Ashley Audrain's new book.
Oh,
It's
Yeah, we read the push.
amazing.
Is it?
okay.
It's phenomenal. You guys are in for such a it's savage in its honesty about motherhood, and it's like absolute nail biting, can't put it down mystery. She's so good.
Did you read the push?
Yeah.
Her book? Yeah,
Yeah.
because
So-
we felt that was one of our selections too. We've been trying to get her on.
Yeah, if you could give a good
Yeah.
word.
So our community, really,
Send her an
everyone
email.
loves, everyone loves the book, and I saw that her new book was coming out. I don't think it's released yet. I have a galley copy. I'm
Oh,
so
do you?
excited.
Yeah, well,
Oh my God. Crack that galley open. It's such a great
Okay.
book.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
I haven't heard anything. I've heard it's coming out, but I haven't heard anyone who's read it yet. So awesome.
I think I was one of the earliest readers. I can't rave about it enough. It's just
Oh,
outstanding.
Thank you for letting us
It's
know that.
Yeah.
dark though. It's really dark. In
But
ways
Push
that the push
too.
isn't, because the push was obviously so extreme, whereas this is about you and me, and it's quite dark.
Is it?
Oh,
Yeah.
but we like that.
Yeah, we do. We
We
like
do.
it. We like when the book's heavy, a little dark and twisty
Yeah.
to them.
It's,
Oh,
it's
that's-
not a comfortable read for any mother, is all I can say.
Okay, we'll keep that in mind.
Yes. No, that's true. Because when we recommend things, we have to.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Rosie, it was a pleasure.
So
Thank
lovely.
you so much for joining
Yes.
us this afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
We really enjoyed your book. Our book club enjoyed reading it. And, thank you so much for taking the time out of your evening and spending it with us here on Oceanside Library. So
Yes.
thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you for
Rosie.
choosing the book.
Be well, and we look forward to the book being on the big screen. That's
Yes.
awesome.
With
For
Amy
streaming.
Adams.
Amy, oh,
Yes.
can't wait.
yes.
Take care,
Have a
guys.
good
Thank you ever so much. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
You too. Thanks.
Isn't she cute? What
This was fabulous.
isn't she a doll? What a nice, humble.
Yeah, she.
Right?
humble.
So like a regular person.
I was saying, I